Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Travis Harrison of 43.2 Fishing. Now, Travis makes killer jigs. My tackle box is full of his stuff. And if you guys are looking to put in an order for some, you can reach out on Instagram at 43.2 Fishing or swing by Eastern Outfitters in Hampstead, North Carolina. Also, I've had incredible support with real estate. I get contacted every week now about somebody looking to buy or sell, and I can't thank you guys enough. This podcast, the fishing channel, these fishing videos, everything is self-funded by my real estate. So I thank you guys, and I ask that you continue to reach out and ask for help, point me in the right direction, keep referring friends. I greatly appreciate all of it. Let's get to the podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today I have bright and early, and I will say this is the first podcast I've done at 7 a.m., but I've got Travis Harrison on from 43.2 Fishing, coming to you live from New Bern, North Carolina. How's it going, man?
Good, man. Good. Hiding from the rain.
Yeah, everybody, we were just talking about how we have a hurricane going over right now. Sustained winds of 25 mile an hour. It's been dumping rain all night. So hopefully we have enough connection to get through a podcast together. But Travis, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. It's been should have happened before now, but dad life and work life and everything, But yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I want to give people a backstory because you and I met each other. It's been probably about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
One of my best friends from college is Travis's cousin, and I ended up starting to come around the LaGrange area through James, and I met Travis. And at the time, we weren't really friends, but we had a lot of people that were in the same circle. And it's funny how life kind of happens. We became, it's been 2-3 years now. We've been talking consistently about fishing, and here we are. Yeah, man, I'm excited to share your story.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's just funny thinking back, like when I got Instagram for the first time. I can't remember, what was your old page name? It was your old Instagram name before it was Eric Williams Realty.
I have another one that I haven't used in years. It was Eric Williams.
I can't remember what it was. It was something about outdoors or something like that.
Oh, outdoor agent. Outdoor agent.
That's right. Outdoor agent. Yeah. And I was like, I know that guy. Like, and I don't know, I just ended up following you, and then I realized, exactly who you were, and pretty much since then we've been chatting it up all the time. So it's good to finally be up here.
Yeah, man. So let's get to it, man. You grew up in LaGrange, North Carolina. What was your experience with getting into the outdoors?
Well, honestly, man, I've always been outdoors, just because my dad and my granddad both, they were, fishermen their entire lives. And so as a child, I grew up hunting and fishing with both of them. I still love hunting, but just not having your own land, I guess, kind of, and the freedom that fishing allows, once you get on the water, it's just as much your property as anyone's. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about anybody running you off. But yeah, so I've been fishing my entire life, and it's just kind of developed. Like once I got my driver's license, just kind of shifted from freshwater brackish to pretty much all brackish salt. And I mean, fly tying and everything else just kind of unfolded from that. I just have a compulsion with wanting to make my own, I guess. Like, it's almost to a fault. So I see something that's what I think is too expensive in a store, and then spend a pile of money trying to make it. But yeah, that's just kind of who I am, I guess.
What was your first experiences with getting involved in saltwater fishing?
Probably my earliest experience would be fishing around my haystacks in Moorhead, in the salt with my granddad and my dad. Um, yeah, we don't really trout fish there much anymore, but back then that's probably one of the primary places we speckled trout fished, especially like September through early November. We speckled trout fish there, and this was a long time ago, like back when the speckled trout limit was still 10 apiece. So I don't know even when that shift happened, but um, that was probably my earliest experience in the full saltwater arena, I guess.
And at that point, had you started considering making your own jigs to target those speckled trout?
Man, at that point, I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I mean,
Oh, okay.
that's literally been 25 years ago. So, um, yeah, I've been saltwater fishing pretty much since I could, be on a boat for a full day. But the tackle making didn't really start until I want to say I was like a sophomore in high school. So probably almost 15 years ago now, um, or I guess it'd be like 14 years ago. That's whenever I started making my own. um, yeah, and I don't know if anyone fishes with like, I mean, that's like the first jig I ever made. It's just like a standard like a finesse ball jig kind of, and that's the first mold I ever got. And honestly, it's probably still my favorite speckled trout uh, jig mold that I have currently. But I'm looking for my new favorite all the time. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So you're a sophomore in high school. You've been buying tackle. You're like, there's a way to do this cheaper. Like
yeah,
what was the progression of like, okay, I need to get all this gear. I need to where do you start?
yeah. So kind of like you said, at the time I was working at Ken's Grill in Lagrange, and I was paying for my gas. Gas was $4 a gallon back then. Um, and I'd see these jigs that were pretty much $1 a piece in a store. And then I'd go fishing in some snaggy structure and lose, 5 jigs in a day. I'm like, I can do this cheaper. Well, turns out that you can't. Um, but but you, yeah, I mean, if you're just making them for yourself, you can probably save a little bit of money if you fish a lot and fish a lot of snaggy structure. Like if you were going to go fish Roanoke Rapids for stripers or something, and you're jigging on the bottom on that. I've never even really fished up there, but I know it's really snaggy. And you lose 10 jigs in a day, you could probably save a little bit of money if you fish every weekend. But um, yeah, so the first thing I bought was, like I said, that one jig mold and a lead melting pot. You don't even really need a lead melting pot. I mean, you could use a gas burner, but the the lead production pot makes it a lot easier to melt the lead safely and uh, not have any propane or anything like that. It's just an electric lead melter. But that's like the first two things I got, and then you have to buy your terminal tackle, your hooks, and wire forms if it's a mold that takes a wire form um, or something like that. But at the time, it was just hooks and then lead. I'd go to the local mechanics and and ask them if I could buy their wheel weights from them, and most of them just would give them to you. But I've kind of gotten out of the wheel weight game. It's really time consuming and really nasty. Messing with brake dust and all that stuff. But that's what I did at the time. Was melted 50 pounds of lead and had enough to last me a really long time at the time.
Yeah, it's funny you say
Yeah.
that. I think one of the I want to say that we started talking about making duck hunting weights because
Hmm.
I was melting, lead from the tackle shops or the tire
Yeah.
shops, and the problem is now you get so many that have like the steel mixed in, you really only get like 30, forty
Half.
percent lead now. So
Yeah.
it is a lot of work to find good lead,
Yeah.
but man, me and my buddy, we have like 400 duck decoys, all with like a pound weight on them because of where we
Yeah.
hunt is strong winds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
man,
like
that
$1,200 of lead. So
yeah, seriously. So yeah, you got
yeah.
to buy that, dude. I can't pay that in a tackle shop or Cabela's
Yeah.
or anything like that. So it makes a lot of sense that
Yeah.
you get it from there. So at that point, you've started making your jigs and everything, and was color involved at that point? Because that's one of the things that sets you apart with your jigs, in my opinion.
Yeah. At the time, I mean, I bought, a bunch of different colors of powder paint, like, the classic colors, white, chartreuse, black, gold, red is a, classic saltwater color. Um, Trying to think of some of the earliest ones I got, probably orange, pink, just the standard that you always see, in the salt. But um, probably for me, like winter trout fishing, normally the water in these brackish creeks sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it'll get pretty clear. Um, like once they back way up in the creek, sometimes, I mean, I've seen it where you can see your jig 5 or 6 feet down. But I'd use like a transparent gold was probably, and probably still is, like that's like my go-to, more finesse, less spooky jig than like a hot pink or something. That was one of my favorite colors then and now too. So but I didn't really delve into fancy colors. I mean, I'd mix a couple, or paint up one electric chicken color or something like that, but not to the extent that I do now. Trying to imitate, structure, or trying to imitate whatever bait that I'm using. Specifically talking about, sheepshead jigs, or um, stuff like that. But normally, like just plain lead is a great all around. You put eyes on the jig and then just use plain lead. But um, if you want to match the soft plastic that you're using, a lot of times I'll do that also.
Yeah, I think back to all of my really big fish, and it's usually either on one live bait or on something that replicates a natural color scheme.
Yeah.
So the
Yep.
gold makes a lot of sense that is would be your go-to then, and still continues to be.
Yep. I don't think I probably have one in my tackle box, but let's see if I can find one. Just a standard.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a transparent copper gold, and just you know, kind of unintrusive, I guess.
Seems like it would have like a
No.
subtle flash too with that darker
Yeah.
gold.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned
Yep.
putting an eye on lead and moving on. How did you get into making the sheepshead jigs? Because that's really what I think you excel at and you shine in, and everyone is falling in love with your jigs. How did you get into that?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, kind of the same story. I see these jigs in stores, and I've already got all the equipment that I need to make my own jigs. And I've tried sheepshead fishing in the past, and succeeded. In small ways, caught several. This is before I really dove into sheepshead. But I've caught sheepshead here and there through my life using bottom, like dropper loop rigs or Carolina rigs, or split shot rigs and stuff like that. But um, sometimes sheepshead can be like, they're not that easy to catch, really. Until you figure them out. And I guess a jig just allows you to have better contact with the bait that you're using. Um, so, basically, the first sheepshead jig that I got was actually and I don't have one in here, but it's actually a swing hook jig. I think actually you got some from me, probably before I even uh, started making jawbreaker
You weren't
jigs.
you weren't selling
Yeah.
anything yet when you and
Yeah.
I
I
were like
wasn't.
exchanging stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So that was the first sheepshead jig that I got. And honestly, it's still a productive sheepshead jig. It works really well. It allows you to kind of change your hook on the fly, I guess. So that was the first sheepshead jig. It was just a football jig, and I got that mold, and um, it has some downfalls, I guess. Sometimes if you like, I had to modify the mold to kind of improve it a little bit, like by adding split rings to keep the hooks from fouling on it. That's kind of the fascination that I have. You can buy jigs in the store; they work great. They're awesome, sheepshead jigs, and they're awesome jigs. But having your own, like for me, I guess one of the fascinations I have is how can I make this better? So that's kind of the driver I had. You buy some jigs of the paint. You're fishing hard structure almost all the time for sheepshead, so you're dropping down on rocks, oyster bars, or stuff like that. And the first couple fish, half the paint's off the jig. I'm like, well, my trout jigs don't. The paint doesn't come off that quick. I mean, I haven't found a paint yet that won't eventually come off, but there's some that are better than others. So that's kind of where my shift happened to wanting to make my own sheepshead jigs.
Yeah, every sheepshead I've caught was on your jigs. And yeah, I think that is what really sells them for me is they're made in New Bern, North Carolina. I mean, you hand make every jig, you hand paint
Yeah.
every jig, and I mean,
Yeah.
I've had some sitting in my tackle box for 2 years now, and the paint's fine on them, getting beat
Yeah.
around in the boat. So
Yeah,
it makes sense that you decided that you wanted to master just the longevity of the jig, not just I want to make it
Yeah.
look good and sell it.
Yeah. Still looking for improvements. I think the hooks that I use are great hooks. I haven't found a good supplier for like a stainless hook, and I'm not 100% sure that I want to go to a stainless, um, just for preservation of the fish. Like if they choke that jig, that stainless isn't going to dissolve or whatever. And sometimes they will choke a jig, and you'll break them off. But um, yeah, so there's always improvements that can be made, and I like to get feedback from everybody that gets anything from me, because if somebody gets something from me and they hate it, I would love for them to get up with me and tell me why, because that's an improvement that I can make. Um, so that's what I base my whole business on, is uh, feedback from people that buy stuff from me, um, or people that I send stuff to, and just say, hey, I haven't tried this out yet. I'd love it if you could fish it and let me know, what you think. So, yeah, no, I've done the same thing with you. I'm like, hey, man, I think this could be good. It'd be cool if you could check it out. I think we did that with some Spanish mackerel flies and stuff. So, um, and it seemed like the feedback on those was half decent anyway. But yeah,
Yeah, you've made a few different kinds, and I mean, I haven't had a whole lot of luck with albies yet. Not because of the stuff that you send me. It's just that I haven't been on them in a year and a half now.
Right.
And it's tough with a fly rod, but that's a different story. Um, yeah, everything that you make me is quality, and I wouldn't want to have this conversation if I didn't believe in your product, and I believed in it before you even started selling. So like,
Yeah.
it's just cool seeing the progression. Do you have any examples that you could show the camera?
of a sheepshead jig.
Yeah, for people that don't understand, Travis he hand paints them, and I want you guys to understand that his color matching is spot on to the areas that you're going to be targeting, whether it be barnacles on a wooden post, whether it be concrete, whether it be you want to fish blue crabs. He's got jigs that look just like blue crab coloration. A few examples would be good for the people at home.
Yes, I mean, I still use the standard. Uh, I still use orange and chartreuse and stuff like that. I feel like I catch I feel like I catch a decent number of redfish if I'm using like brighter colors. And I still catch obviously sheepshead. They don't. Sometimes they do care, and sometimes they don't. Um, I would say more often than not, they more care more about the crab that you're using than the jig color. But there are circumstances where I feel like I do better with a more natural. So this is like probably my favorite color, and honestly, this is one of the first custom colors that I made. I call it camo fiddler, but it's like I don't know how well you can see it, but get some better light up here. I don't know how well you can see the
You
colors
can
on
see
it,
it
but
very clearly.
yeah, so it's like a kind of a bone white and then brown. It's like a brown base and then like a bone white and a purple, kind of um, just all mingled together. And when you cure the paint, they kind of, it's honestly, it's almost like a science experiment that I've just, over the almost probably 13 or 14 years, you kind of learn how the different paints interact when they start to cure. So it's called Camo Fiddler, but um, I like this is a good clear watercolor. And it just kind of looks like on a piling, depending on what kind of growth it is, you'll have some purples and the barnacles that they're white, gray. So that kind of just blends in with that, and then obviously you'll have browns and stuff on the bait that you're using. Fiddler crabs have purple, brown, tan, and then I call this one blue crab. But it's kind of the same concept as this, but you just have purple instead or blue instead of purple. But this is probably my favorite clear watercolor. You know, the water is like blue. I don't honestly know how that backdrop plays a part, but I know free divers a lot of times they'll wear like blue camo for free diving, but I assume it just breaks up that pattern of a big, like a big orange jig hanging there next to the bait. But this is another good clear watercolor. And then, there's colors that these are more for, I guess, blending in with the structure, kind of like a camo. And then there's some that this is urchin. Um, so this one looks more like what a sea urchin would look like. And, everybody knows. And I've honestly never caught a sheepshead on urchins, but I know that sheepshead like urchins, and this is one of my better selling colors. A lot of people use this one at nighttime because it's a
Oh
darker
yeah,
color or whatever.
yeah, that
Um,
makes sense.
and this one is like a mud crab color, and just like it's got like a purple color shift because stone crabs and mud crabs, sheepshead will eat both of them. We can't fish with stone crabs, but sheepshead eat them. Um, and then they'll have like a lighter colored grayish belly on them, but and then honestly, probably two of my best selling is a sand flea color. Um, and this just, matches a, this is probably one of the more accurately matched, sand flea have the eggs when they're spawning or whatever. And then kind of a mottle gray white top. And then the, angry fiddler or whatever, this one looks more so just like a fiddler crab in my opinion. But, it's just, there's like 5 or 6 different colors mixed in here that kind of contribute to what I call a color scheme of a fiddler crab. But that's the more custom colors that I make, and I'm that's what everybody that matches me. I would say, if you see something that, or if you don't see something that you're looking for, let me know, and I'm open to making anything. So, um, yeah.
How important is hook selection when you're making your jigs?
Well, the mold will dictate a lot of your hook selection. Um, you can buy molds that take a wire form, and then you can put any straight shank hook in that mold. I have a couple molds that do that, and I can actually adapt my jawbreaker mold to do that. But um, as far as a jig hook, uh, I guess it depends on what you're expecting to target. Like I've never had an issue, but when I first started making jawbreaker jigs before I started selling them, it was like COVID, and I couldn't actually find the hooks that my mold called for. So the hook I was using was actually they're the same wire form, but um, this is like the 1X version of it. I don't know if you can tell on camera, like these are the same
Oh
wire
yeah,
form, but
yeah.
this hook is a lot, it's like 2X strong from this wire form. Um, and, I never had any issue with sheepshead, but I did have like a 30-inch redfish in a dock one day. I pawned my spool and had to back him out of there, and I caught the fish, fine, but it did flex my hook just a little bit. So, that's just kind of the consideration you have to make is like for sheepshead, if you're always going to have a chance to catch a redfish and black drum when you're sheepshead fishing. But like I've never had a sheepshead open up one of those 1X strong hooks, but the penetration on those hooks is extremely good. And it is on the 2X strong as well, but it just takes a little bit more leverage to drive that hook with a 2X strong wire, So mostly the drivers are what you're going to target and your mold.
And you also got into making the Manic Mullet. That's one that you sent me a pack, like I said, 2 years ago. I'm still fishing some of the original 1/8 jigs, and I love those things.
Yeah.
Man, I've caught so many fish on those things.
Yeah.
Why did you start going from your original design over to the Manic Mullet design?
Well, one reason was the eyes on the jig. A lot of people say, predators strike the eye of a jig. I mean, obviously, I've caught 1,000 trout on the standard ball jig, but I do think sometimes they'll key in on. I don't think if you're on the fish, if you reel a paddle tail with a jig with an eye or not, they see that bait swimming and they're just going to hit it. But I think sometimes they will key in on that head of that bait or whatever, kind of like a hot spot, or that little bit of added flash or whatever. Because any swim bait jig, whenever it's coming through the water, it's going to have a wobble to it. So especially in like muddier water or something, every time that jig tips to the side, you're going to be showing that eye of that jig to the bottom or whatever. And another reason is that jig goes to a half an ounce. So like people who were fishing, for instance, like the rock jetty at Riceville or something like that, that half ounce would play a more important role than like you're not going to fish a 1/8 ounce finesse jig at the rock jetty out there off 30 feet of water or whatever. So, and it has heavier hooks and a little bit better of a bait keeper. And I've actually now, since I started, and I don't know what you have, but let's see, I've got one here. Yeah, so like I've modified this mold also to accept a wire keeper down here on the bottom.
Mine have wire keepers, and that's huge.
Yeah.
And nobody was doing that when you started doing that. Nobody was doing that.
Yeah, the wire keeper just is a game changer. You can, like, Z-Man, it holds Z-Man a lot better. It'll still get pulled down on Z-Man just because it doesn't really dig into the plastic. But, like, for one thing, like the other day, I went bull drum fishing, and this is the same jig mold on a bucktail. And I've just got a wire keeper, and it's, in the first half inch of that bait, and I caught 2 bull reds, and I casted this all day, and the wire keeper never moved.
Yeah.
No super glue or anything. So the wire keeper is just a game changer. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about that bucktail because there's a little more to that story than just showing it. So you use the jig that you designed, and then you also tie the fly on the back. Can you show that one more time?
Yeah. So I got some just plain bucktails. So this is a 3/8 ounce, it's a Manic Mullet jig, but it just has white bucktail. This one's actually going to a guy for fishing flounder. Even
that
though the
flash
flounder
looks
season,
good. That flash looks really good.
Yeah, it just kind of sets it off a little bit, but basically what the benefit of a bucktail is, and I'll slip this plastic on here. Should have done this before, but Yeah, so when you push that bucktail up against that, or that plastic up against that bucktail, it'll flare the bucktail out slightly. But in the water, basically what'll happen. I'm gonna dip this in my drinking water on my desk, but when the bucktail gets wet, it'll just taper down,
Yeah.
and it
Gives
just
it
feels it.
body.
Yeah, it gives it movement and body. So for bull drum fishing, particularly, you're fishing under a cork. You pop that cork, and sometimes you wait, 5 or 6 seconds before you pop it again, and you can either have, just a piece of plastic hanging there, just not moving, or it's going to move some, especially if it's a paddle tail, but the bucktail is always going to be moving, and the flash especially too. The flash moves even more than the bucktail. The bucktail is like a support material for the flash. It keeps it from wrapping around your hook, but um, yeah, the bucktail. So this one's kind of like a Menhaden color scheme, and it just like this is a Mirror provoker soft plastic, and it just gives that some body, and then you have that tail, that's kicking behind it or whatever, and it looks. I mean, in the water, it looks a lot like a Menhaden. So that's kind of the color scheme I was going for there. And the first morning I took it out, within 15 minutes of being there, 49-inch redfish on a jig that I made. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's the addiction that I have with tackle making is you get feedback from fish, and when you do something that they like, it's an accomplishment every time you catch something on something you make.
Well, the last thing I want to talk about is your new one. And I don't even know what name you're going with. So can you show us those
Yeah.
jigs and give us a little explanation about that?
Well, honestly, I haven't gotten feedback yet, so I don't. I've sent them to a couple people, and I think they're going to be good for
Yeah.
sight fishing reds. It's kind of where I think they'll end up going. But the original purpose of them was, you just dropped a video about pompano fishing. And, pompano, they eat, crustaceans, and I'm assuming crabs and shrimp and stuff like that. So um, I don't, honestly, I don't have one tied on a jawbreaker. Well, I have not the shrimp color, but
Mm-hmm.
this was like I sent these to a guy down there in Wrightsville, like one of the first people who figured out the pompano down there. And I want to say it was this. I think I'm gonna call them jaw bunnies, but it's pretty much a bunny, like a rabbit strip, and it's tied on a jawbreaker jig. Because a
Yeah.
jawbreaker, when it sits on the bottom, it'll be canted up off the bottom. So like if this was the bottom, it'll be canted off the bottom, and it'll look like a crab or shrimp down there on the bottom. Um,
And you
And I
pop it a
think the
little
first
bit.
time,
You pop it a little bit
yeah,
and it bounces on the bottom. Oh my gosh, it's going to
yeah,
have so much action.
yeah, and then like rabbit in the water, it just comes to life. I mean, it like when it gets wet, people will say it's not going to look good, but just as soon as you dip that thing back in the water, it blows up and just has tons of movement in the water. I mean, just sitting still in the tide flowing. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. Like they always say, if a red fish feels like he found it, he's going to eat it, and that's kind of the benefit of using like a natural material over a plastic. And there's some plastics that have good movement when they're just resting on the bottom, like a paddle tail. Some of them do, but they won't move like bucktail or like rabbit. So that's kind of where I'm thinking this will excel, is sit on the bottom. But this is like the shrimp, uh, the
Yeah.
shrimp pattern or whatever. Just has a little bit of flash under the belly, and then the body's just kind of muted natural colors. Um, I don't know that the eyes really matter, but they look good on Instagram. So um,
Well, they look
yeah,
good.
they
Good.
they could play it. Shrimp have really dark black or darker colored eyes. So you know, I think that'll look like one, and obviously it'll be swimming in reverse. So this will look like a shrimp spooking off the bottom, and this is a 1/16 ounce. So this would be like skinny water. And this one's tied on my original standard ball jig, but um, yeah. So that's kind of, I'm excited to see where that one's going to go.
Well, you give it another month and a half, and that crystal clear water will be back, and then that's when the reds
Yeah,
will start grouping up, and you can really try those things
yeah,
out down here.
that's right. So
Yeah.
you're kind of moving fly fishing to spin tackle, I guess, fly to spin tackle. And that's just what I just like the design part of fly tying, and you just can perfectly match, whatever they're eating. I mean, like you're talking about albies. I'm supposed to send these to you. I'm sorry I haven't yet, but
Oh, you're
I mean
good, man.
it's like a glass minnow. I mean, you just get to match whatever they're eating perfectly, and almost chasing the perfect pattern is what fascinates me, I guess. So yeah,
Well, cool, man. Is
yeah.
there anything else that I have failed to ask you about as far as your tackle making goes?
Well, one thing, um, probably the most important part in my opinion, of 43.2 fishing, is kind of the theme of 43.2 fishing. You hear people say 432, or they don't understand why the name is what it is. But um, just a little bit about me. I'm a believer. I'm a Christian, and that's kind of when COVID hit. We just kind of got disconnected from one another, and I just used social media as a tool to connect me back with people that I didn't get to see, and it's just kind of developed into 43.2 fishing from my personal Instagram. So 43.2 is based off of the scripture Isaiah 43.2, and that's like the theme verse for 43.2 fishing. And what that verse says is, when you pass through waters, I will be with you, and through rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, uh, you shall not be burned, and the flames will not consume you. So I just carry that verse with me throughout every day, and it just helps me cope with the stresses of the world. You're going to feel overwhelmed by the rivers of life, and you get a lot of heat on you from your boss, or your job, or anything like that. So I think that's probably the most important thing of 43.2 fishing is just, I'm not the best at being positive, or um, being optimistic in times of stress, and that verse is something I carry with me, every day. So I think I wish we just talked about it sooner, but I think that is for sure the most important message that I'll ever give, whether it be a fly tying or tackle making demonstration. That's the most important message that I'll ever give. So
Yeah.
other than that, man, I enjoyed it.
Well, I was about to ask you about that, but you led right into it, so that works. Yeah, man. I think that God uses us when we finally stop trying to make our way, and we focus on, okay, you take over, take the reins. I'm just here. And
Yep.
like I think about like the growth that just from us being friends over the last few years, it's incredible seeing like how much improvement you have in your jigs alone, not to mention the reach that you have. Like you've got people all over the eastern part of the country now catching fish on your jigs.
Yeah.
And I know that that's all God, man. Like that's
Yeah.
what it is. So it's really
Yeah.
cool to see that,
Yeah, I take no credit.
recognize that too, because that's what the point is. The point is to be thankful for what experiences and positions we're put in order to keep doing what we're doing to spread His name. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, I know that we could talk for 2 more hours about just one topic, but
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll just go ahead and plan on being more specific for the next few podcasts, because we'll have to make this a
All right.
series. But
All
yeah,
right.
I appreciate you coming on, man, and telling the story of how
Yeah.
you got going, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, man.